I landed in Nashville at 6:15 a.m., wiped the Dubai grit off my shoes, and drove home thinking about coffee on the deck, quiet water, the soft slap of a boat against the dock, the kind of ordinary small mercy you earn after 8 months on a 12-hour clock. 8 months of permit fights and contractor phone calls and, yeah, delivering a project under budget by $4 million, so I deserved the slow drive up that last ridge. I came around the final bend, hit the brakes, and the world did one of those weird double takes with me. My guest wing was gone. Not burned, not looted, gone. And the east side of the mansion, the wing I had poured money and patience into, restoring, torn open, like someone had decided the house was a pop-open brochure. There was a yellow notice stapled to what remained of the front door, soggy from rain, and the words hit like a punch. Delinquent dues unpaid. 8 months, authorized demolition. Signed, Karen Hollis, HOA President. My dues had been on auto pay for 6 years. The bank cleared a transfer in August. But Karen's system didn't recognize my corporate name, so instead of a phone call, they sent bulldozers. What Karen hadn't checked, because was that I don't just own a house in Lakeview Heights, I own the land under the entire place. 847 acres, every road, every path, the lake. The ground under her house purchased in 2019, master deed recorded legally clean. Homeowners there buy structures, walls, roofs, memories, and lease the dirt under their feet. Harold Whitfield built the place that way in 1962, and I bought his land in full. When she signed the demolition order, Karen didn't demolish a stranger's house. She demolished the house sitting on my soil, her own lessor's property. I stood in the compound of broken tile and splintered oak, and took inventory the way a person trained in construction does: wide shots, mediums, close-ups, and called Richard Cole, my property lawyer. He answered on the second ring like he'd been expecting bad news. "They demolished my house," I said, and the silence on the line told him everything he needed to know before I spelled out the address. Richard showed up quiet and precise, like someone who builds arguments the same way he builds cases, with measured pieces stacked to support an inevitable truth. He read the notice, walked the exposed rooms, squinted at the original oak paneling that's older than some of the suburbs nearby, and said, "This is extraordinary." Then he did the math out loud. Demolition, replacement costs, punitive exposure, the fact that an HOA policy doesn't ensure willful destruction of property the HOA does not own. $6 million, he said to start. I went to the clubhouse because that's where you sit, face to face with the person who decided your life could be rearranged by a lack of database hygiene. Karen Hollis was exactly the sort of small-town authority figure who learns to speak with a cadence that sounds like power, practiced, crisp, confident. She rose when I walked in, offered the rehearsed lines about community standards and abandoned properties, and then the moment everything slid off the script, I told her I own every inch of the ground. She blinked like I'd spoken foreign. "Have your attorney pull the master deed," I said, and left my card on her desk. Her eyes went to the card the way people go to a porch light when they're lost. That night, sitting in the western wing that had survived the wreck, I watched the lake through old wavy glass and felt a patience I'd practiced for 6 years finally run out. The twist, the thing that changes the chessboard, showed up the next morning in the meeting room. Karen's attorney sat across from us with wire-rimmed glasses and a yellow legal pad, and he read the 2019 assignment out loud like a conjurer's reveal. Blackwood Capital Holdings purchased the master deed. The homeowners owned their structures. The company owned the land. The room filled with people who'd built their lives on assumptions went quiet enough you could hear the HVAC thinking. That quiet birthed panic. A treasurer who'd asked one crucial question realized out loud he'd been living over someone else's land for years. Mortgages secured against leasehold interest, not fee. Simple ownership, and for the first time, the theoretical became very dangerously real. If ground leases could be terminated for material breach, and they could then, a demolition of the ground lessor's property could trigger termination. Mortgages have acceleration clauses. Lenders could call loans due. The legal doc that had seemed like paperwork at closing suddenly had teeth. 2 board members produced resignation letters they had written weeks earlier when they'd been overruled. Their dissent mattered. It showed the demolition wasn't unanimous. Robert Marsh, the one who'd voted against the order twice and resigned, became the unexpected ally and moral center, the small, salvific character who'd tried to stop the machine and then offered his testimony and his credibility when the machine broke down. We sent notices, legal, formal, devastatingly specific, to Karen and the 6 board members who'd voted for the demolition. The notices said in plain language, your vote may have been a material breach under Section 14, Paragraph 3 of the ground lease. You have 21 days to respond. The community found out in about 4 hours. Confidentiality in a small development is a myth. The town Facebook erupted with fear. Are our mortgages at risk? And anger. Some people called me furious. Some were apologetic. Most wanted answers. At a packed emergency meeting, Karen tried to wrap the story in the comfort of bylaws and precedent. A retired attorney in the back row said simply and without rancor, material breach provisions are standard and enforceable. If you demolish ground lessor property, you risk termination. The room turned. The petition for Karen's resignation grew like mold on bread, fast, inevitable, ugly. Karen filed suit, of course. She had to pride and strategy are twin engines in such fights. We counterclaimed. In front of Judge Warren Holloway, the question was simple in its legal purity. Do HOA bylaws allow demolition over the property of a third-party owner? The judge read Section 14 and then read it again like someone tasting a wine to be sure. The language was clear: actions by the HOA that cause material damage to ground lessor property count as breach. He denied their motion to enjoin our review and moved straight to damages. The damages hearing was painful for them and procedural for us. Receipts, contractor bids, expert testimony about restoration costs, and the market value of the loss. On May 2nd, the judge handed down a 61-page ruling that felt like the kind of moral clarity you hope for in courtrooms. The HOA had no authority to demolish structures on land it did not own, and failure to do basic due diligence was reckless. $6 million in compensatory damages, $2 million for the main structure, another chunk for replacement loss of use and diminution, and punitive damages for willful conduct. Karen was personally tagged with a $1.2 million punitive judgment. When the county seized HOA reserves and frozen accounts, the organization was exposed like a house after a storm, foundations suddenly visible and broken. Karen filed bankruptcy. She listed assets that, stripped of the ground lease, were worth much less. Her home, once appraised at $680, was suddenly a structure without land appraised at $190. Lenders accelerated loans. She could not find a buyer willing to assume a house with no land rights. Eventually, she sold what remained for salvage value and moved away quietly. No farewell post, no vindication. 5 of the 6 board members who'd voted for the demolition settled modest sums compared to the judgment, but enough to buy back their leasehold peace. The 6th fought longer and then settled in the end with a public acknowledgement. The math never quite closed. The HOA dissolved by community vote rather than let the litigation consume the neighborhood. The homeowners I hadn't wanted to punish, 333 of them, formed a committee, came to the table in humility, and asked for a new framework. They wanted clarity, not vengeance. Here's the quiet lesson that crept up on me. Not a sermon. Just a slow, late dawn. Contracts mean things only when people read them, and authority corrodes quickly when it's not accompanied by curiosity. Harold Whitfield built Lakeview Heights to last, and he did it by keeping something people always forget to pay attention to. Land is different. It is permanence. It is leverage. It is not the same thing as committee consensus. We rebuilt. Bigger, because I'm not sentimental about revenge. I'm pragmatic about opportunity. A 200-square-foot east wing that looks as if it was always part of the house, period, accurate, but better the way you fix a hatchet job, by paying attention to proportion. We negotiated new ground lease documents that were clear as a billboard, not buried in fine print, 99-year renewable leases, annual capped increases, transparent duties, an annual forum where I or my representative would sit with homeowners and answer questions. Transparency, it turned out, is worth more than comfortable ambiguity. By October, the crane lifted fresh timber, and the bones of a larger, stronger house took shape. By December, Zillow and the market had begun to right themselves. Buyers prefer clarity to mystery. The HOA reformed under new leadership. Robert Marsh, President; Patricia Walsh, Vice David Chin, Treasurer; And the first thing they did was adopt documents that explicitly limited HOA authority to what it actually should be: community standards, inside structures, and common area governance, not the power to decide who owns the ground. But Karen lost a home, a board lost its. But Karen lost a home, a board lost its power, and a community gained the honest paperwork everyone should have had from the start. I didn't demolish anyone's life for fun. I enforced contracts I had paid for, and when authority acts without curiosity, the consequence is often larger than anyone expects. So here's where I leave you with the thing that makes people want to argue in the comments. Justice happened, but was it justice or simply consequence? Did we get the right outcome because the law was clear, or because one person leaned on power without doing her homework? Tell me, where do we draw the line between enforcing contracts and using power to punish? Have you ever had a neighbor or an organization assume authority it didn't have? Drop your story below, tell me what you think, right, wrong, or somewhere in the messy middle. And if you've been anywhere near this kind of land contract surprise, share that too.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.